Hey guys, it's Sandro here, and today's video is a head-to-head ceramic coating comparison including Gyeon Mohs Evo, PNS, Inspiration, and 3D ceramic coatings. Like it or not, ceramic coatings are here to stay, and in the decade or so I've been professionally applying them, the demand has only grown with each passing year. As such, just about every detailing brand on the market has released their own ceramic coating. So I thought it could be interesting to place 3 ceramic coatings from 3 detailing brands that have varied paths in the ceramic coating space and just see how they hold up to some vigorous testing and evaluation. Being that I don't personally use any of these coatings in my business, I was also really interested to see how they'd perform and compare to one another in areas such as the user experience, looks, feel, hydrophobicity, potential durability, and ultimately value. So let's get to it. The first area of assessment was the user experience. So how easy or difficult is it for a beginner to grasp and correctly apply them? How rewarding or tedious are they to work with, and how is that overall user experience like as a whole? Starting with Mohs Evo, Gyeon basically says apply it any way you like. Just make sure to work it in well and then buff it off well, and I can attest it's certainly true and flexible in that way. Now having said that, and after spending quite a bit of time with these coatings, I did feel there's an optimal way to apply and read this coating, at least for me. Mohs is definitely a very rapidly flashing coating. You can see that by the way it almost immediately hazes over within seconds. What I found was that if I kept on wiping it with my applicator to the point where it just started to feel a touch grippy, which was usually about 20 seconds or so, that was the perfect time to then immediately wipe it down. So you just work it till you feel a touch of friction, which indicates it's flashed and bonded to the paint as well as it's streaking, and then immediately buff it straight off. There's a little flexibility, so you don't need to feel rushed, but I wouldn't let it sit for more than a minute or so, as at that point you may need to reapply it to remove the streaks. But even then, it's no real issue. Just apply it and immediately wipe it off, and any streaks or high spots will be sorted. I thought the wipe off itself was quite nice without too much effort, and it actually feels rather nice. It's a quite speedy application, so you can move quickly, and it's almost fail-safe for beginners because you don't have to worry too much about flash and wipe-off times. PNS Inspiration is yet another fairly quick flashing coating. Not quite as super quick as Mohs Evo, as you will hopefully be able to see that its nice and strong rainbow effect took a little longer to streak in my environment, but I'm sure on a hot day it could certainly be a wipe-on and wipe-off coating. Now in a video I watched with a PNS rep, there seemed to be this elaborate process of applying it quite specifically, and then firstly wiping it with a dry cloth, then a damp cloth, and then a third dry cloth as a process, which seemed a little overkill and pretty unnecessary for me, though I did try it. I honestly had no issue with the wipe off. It actually seemed very nice and quite easy to read with a strong rainbow streaking, but maybe in the hot summer weather a damp cloth may be needed, I'm not sure, but for me it was quite easy to level down. I wouldn't say it's as easy or quick as Mohs, but still relatively good. 3D's coating is still a fairly quick flashing coating, but by comparison to the others in my slightly colder environment, it was the coating here that needed to sit for a couple of minutes longer to completely flash before the wipe off. It doesn't streak as much as Gyeon Mohs or have that same strong rainbow effect of Inspiration, but it still has a little of both, just to a lesser degree. You can definitely feel a bit more grip as you lay it down and once again as you wipe it off, so it's not quite as pleasurable to work with as the other two, but I still think it's reasonable. But I would be interested to see what it's like to apply on a hot day. All in all, I think as far as taking out the guesswork and being super quick and easy to apply, Gyeon Mohs was the best here. Inspiration was a close second and still seemed quite nice. And while 3D certainly wasn't bad, it was a touch harder to read and just not quite as pleasurable to wipe by comparison. Something that may or may not be important to you, but I still think is worth mentioning, is the presentation and packaging of these coatings. Gyeon Mohs comes in quite a unique and beautifully screen printed bottle that also includes instructions, a maintenance guide booklet, a quality dual-sided micro suede and microfiber applicator, and a couple of stickers, all contained within a thoughtful and great looking outer package. 3D's coating is also well presented in a robust and nice glossy printed label outer box with a green and black colour theme. It has an internal plastic membrane to keep the bottle and the nicely embossed and functional applicator with green matching microsuede cloths and instructions all snug and tight during shipping. So once again, it's very functional, clean and presents very well. PNS Inspiration comes in a brown glass bottle with a paper sticker label that's already got frayed edges. The included applicator is just too big and clumsy and not something I'd personally use. There was an included sticker but no instructions or application guide, and the outer package is like a pizza box grade of cardboard that doesn't hold the coating in place during shipping and just couldn't feel any cheaper. There's just no thought or care in this package. It's simply cheap and barely acceptable for a $185 coating. For that sort of money, I don't think it's out of bounds to say it should be better. After the coatings were allowed to fully cure over a fortnight, the first test I like to do is assess the application cloths for hardness. Now, hardness isn't everything in a coating, but a true ceramic coating should, in my opinion, harden to an identifiable rate. Now, although all the cloths and coatings did harden to some degree, it was noticeable that Gyeon Mohs didn't harden as much compared to the others, and even compared to Gyeon Pure that I reviewed a while back. Inspiration did harden a little more than Mohs, but I wouldn't say it was all that hard or stiff in general. 3D ceramic coating was quite clearly the hardest curing coating here, and maybe a little more typical in this area compared to the other two coatings that seemed a touch on the softer side. Next up was assessing the ability of these coatings to improve the look of automotive paint. So in this test, I'm looking for improvements in reflective gloss, clarity, saturation or the darkening effect, as well as filling abilities to mask light haze and compounding swirls. Now look guys, I try and film these videos in a way that also allows you guys to judge the results, so you can certainly draw your own conclusions as we have a look at the panels in both indoor and outdoor lighting. But when it comes to increased levels of reflective gloss and added saturation, as well as some filling abilities, for me, Gyeon Mohs was quite clearly the winner here by at least a couple of steps. I think it looks quite good and creates obvious and distinct improvements in the finish to take the paint to the next level. In complete contrast, it's just hard to see much of an improvement in the section with PNS Inspiration. Now it certainly has done something to slightly improve gloss and saturation, but compared to Mohs, it's very limited in this area. And it's hard to see an obvious improvement and has almost no filling capabilities and is objectively a little underwhelming in this area. For a long-term ceramic coating that should apply relatively thick compared to waxes or sealants, it seems very understated in the looks department. I think 3D ceramic coating looked relatively good here and overall is a little closer to Gyeon Mohs as a whole. I'd even say its filling ability to mask haze and light swirls was perhaps the best in this area. But in terms of gloss and saturation, it was more of a middle ground here and not quite as good as Mohs, but certainly better than Inspiration. Next up was assessing the slickness or reduced friction that these coatings create on automotive paint. So added slickness helps things like wash mitts, cloths and drying towels glide over the paint with less friction, reducing the likelihood of maintenance swirls. Just like the previous test, this was also pretty clear cut in my eyes. Gyeon was far and away the slickest coating here, and I would actually say it's got to be one of the slickest coatings on the market. And compared to Gyeon Pure, that's quite a tacky coating, it just couldn't be more different in this area. Inspiration coating was bang in the middle here. I wouldn't say it's a very slick coating, nor would I say it's very tacky, but more so typical in this area as far as ceramic coatings go. 3D on the other hand is in fact quite a tacky and grippy coating that straight away reminded me of Gyeon Pure Evo. I simply couldn't get my ceramic coating bottle to glide over it at all, not even a millimeter. It just dug right in and wouldn't budge, which was a little disappointing. So onto some water behavior testing to assess the hydrophobic abilities of these coatings. I'm going to start with the red panel. That's a harder paint type and had 2 layers of each coating applied, as I think it's a better representation of the coatings, but I'll talk more about that in a bit. As I continue to introduce various amounts of water onto the panel, what we'll hopefully see is that 2 of the coatings do in fact have pretty impressive hydrophobic behavior, being both PNS Inspiration and Gyeon Mohs. On this panel, there's not much in it between them, as they both sheet the water quite quickly and both display rather nice propped up water bead contact angles and shapes. In saying that, if I did have to choose a winner here, I would say that the Gyeon coating did sheet the water a fraction of a second faster and perhaps had ever so slightly better water bead contact angles. But it's honestly so close that it's a non-issue and not a reason I choose one over the other, as I think you'd be happy with either coating in this area. 3D's coating by comparison, or really by most measurements in this area, had rather poor hydrophobic behaviour as it struggles to sheet the water at a reasonable rate, and its water contact angles are definitely flatter with more oddly shaped water bead droplets. Now, it's not completely terrible, as compared to the bare or untreated paint it still improves the hydrophobicity, but it's certainly not impressive to say the least. Now, something I do need to bring up that you'll see in a bit on the black test panel is that the water behaviour of P&S Inspiration as well as the chemical resistance isn't as good on that panel, so I would tend to say the coating application of Inspiration was at least partially degraded there. But here's the thing, this was the second time and second panel with soft paint I applied it to in a single layer, and the same thing happened again. The other two coatings were unchanged and performed identically on every panel I applied them, yet P&S for some reason either didn't like that paint or didn't perform as well as a single layer, and this happened multiple times. Strange things happen sometimes, and I'd rather say I messed up than blame the coating, but this was kind of weird and certainly not common for this to happen. But I couldn't spend any more time to get to the bottom of it, as I already spent way too much time on this video. I just wanted to point that out to be as fair and transparent as I can. The last thing I wanted to show is that right now I'm applying more typical heavy amounts of rainwater over the panel, and as you can see, regardless of whether the coating is more hydrophobic or hydrophilic, the water isn't sheeting off, it's still spotting. The amount of water it takes to cleanly sheet over a panel is immense, and it doesn't rain like that, guys. If it did, your town or city would be underwater within hours. You only see this sheeting effect when washing your car with increased volumes of water. So water spotting isn't unique to hydrophobic coatings. Hydrophilic coatings will 100% also spot. It's just more obvious or prominent with hydrophobic coatings because you get more precise and smaller beads rather than fewer but larger and irregular beads with hydrophilic finishes. The last test in this comparison was a chemical resistance test to try and evaluate the potential durability and resistance of these coatings to certain cleaning chemicals and environmental contamination. I used CarPro Multi-X all-purpose cleaner at a 1 to 2 dilution, firstly lightly treating the panel and then getting more aggressive with each subsequent application. Now, the first thing you're immediately going to see is just how well Gyeon Mohs rejects the chemical compared to the other two coatings. It's just a great sign that it's potentially going to be able to reject contamination to a greater level and just not allow it to bond or break down the coating quite as easily. Now, in saying that, both Mohs and Inspiration coatings held up to the lighter chemical hits quite well, while the 3D coating just immediately started degrading at the very first light chemical treatment and continued to degrade at a much faster rate than the other two, almost taking no time at all to completely kill its performance, which was surprising and of course disappointing. At this point, it really became a two-coating race. All in all, I think P&S Inspiration did quite well here, but it's also safe to say that Gyeon did extremely well here and was quite easily the winner, resisting the chemical much better by a comfortable margin. I try to be as objective, transparent and fair as I can with these videos, but as you guys have a look at the hydrophobic and chemical testing on the black test panel, I'll sum up this video with my more subjective opinions. I think it's great 3D released a ceramic coating, as it's certainly a brand with a great history as far as car compounds and detailing products in general go. I think if the brand is able to develop a great semi-permanent ceramic coating, it could certainly grow and expand 3D even further in the nano coating segment of car detailing supplies. Having said that, I don't feel that this particular ceramic coating is the one that's going to do it. Although the application is fine, it could still be a little nicer and easier for the consumer market. I think it looks reasonably nice and actually has very impressive filling abilities, but its overly tacky finish creates a bit too much friction in my opinion. Some people like a more hydrophilic coating, but I have to be honest that for me, its hydrophobic performance was disappointing. But beyond any of that, I just couldn't get over how sensitive it was to even a light chemical hit, showing very little resistance to the chemicals and degrading far too quickly to have any chance of living up to its 2-year durability claim that seems very unlikely in normal environmental conditions. I like that it's made in the USA, just like P&S Inspiration, and not offshored to cheaper labour countries, and I'd be happy to pay more for it if a version 2 of this coating is able to get it to a higher standard. But for now, it's kind of expensive without the performance to back it up. P&S is a detailing brand that's had great momentum over the past few years, and their ceramic coatings have certainly been around for a number of years, though it's only been more recently that they've become available here locally. While researching these coatings, it seems as though Inspiration should come with instructions and potentially a nicer applicator, but that's not what I personally received. It also seems like people were having issues with Inspiration's wipe off, which is why I believe they now suggest using a damp cloth to wipe it. I personally thought the application was quite nice and easy without a wet cloth, and although it's not the slickest coating, I still thought it was reasonable in that area. Now when it comes to looks, I just feel it needs to look better. It just seems to do so little to improve gloss and saturation compared to almost any coating on the market, and that's a hard thing to overlook or accept in my opinion. A good ceramic coating needs to look great, and I think it falls short in this area. When layered, I thought the water behaviour was quite impressive and almost as good as Mohs, and the chemical resistance was also fairly decent. But as a single layer and on soft and sensitive paints, it does seem a bit degraded by comparison and a little more inconsistent. Look guys, I'm happy to say that maybe I screwed up 2 times in a row on that softer clear coat, and to be safe and respectful, I think the red panel with a harder paint and 2 coats of the coating applied is a fairer way to assist the coating, as it certainly performed much better there. But even with that grace given, at least in this comparison, there wasn't a single area where Inspiration outperformed Gyeon Mohs. And when you consider that Inspiration is 50% more expensive than Mohs, it's hard to justify it unless of course you do want to buy a locally made ceramic coating, in which case I'd 100% support it. I also know that P&S offers their Legend coating that also comes in at $240 here locally, so that could certainly be an even better performing coating if you're willing to up your spend. It's probably safe to say that most people watching this video already know that Gyeon has quite a history in the ceramic coating space, and I think it's fair to say they are a nano coating focused detailing brand. You don't have to have a history in coatings to put out a great one, but it certainly helps having that experience under your belt. In most reviews I do, there's rarely a single product that ticks all boxes or outperforms the competitors outright in every area of assessment. But from application, to looks, to slickness, hydrophobic behavior and chemical resistance, it's pretty clear that Gyeon Mohs Evo was the leader here in every area, though some areas were closer than others. Look guys, in another comparison against 2 other coatings, it could have been a very different result, but here in this comparison, I think it was quite clear. Like I mentioned earlier, I had no idea what to expect, as these aren't coatings I personally use, but they are coatings you guys have requested I review, and at the cost of about $500 with shipping to purchase these coatings, I really hope this review is helpful to some of you out there, or I'm just going to cut my losses and start reviewing products from the $2 store. I think I'll leave it there guys, and if you enjoyed this video and would like to say thanks and help support future content, you can do so by buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/ccad, in which I'll leave a link to in the description box, or you can now hit the thanks button below the video, and thank you everyone for the support so far. As always, I really hope you guys enjoyed and found this video useful. Please share it with others, give it a like and comment below to show support for this content, and I'll see you guys soon.